Hello and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today. And we start from Egypt, and the Ministry of International Cooperation and Afreximbank held talks over cooperation and food security. During the meeting, the ministry lauded the role of development partners to finance private sector. Details follow.
African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank President Benedict Orama stressed that the bank provided financing worth $30 billion over the past 5 years, including $16 billion for the financial sector, pointing out that these financings strengthened the ability of Egyptian companies to expand their business on the African continent. This came in a meeting with the Ministry of International Cooperation to discuss cooperation with the Afreximbank in advancing South-South cooperation and benefiting from development experiences in Egypt. During the meeting, the two sides also discussed joint work in the field of food security and enhancing agricultural investment in Africa, in addition to various development fields, and discussing cooperation with the bank through the Hub for Advisory, Finance and Investment for Enterprises to achieve integration between the bank's efforts to empower the private sector and the services and information the platform provides to achieve interconnection with development partners and the business community. They also discussed the Hub for Advisory, Finance and Investment for Enterprises platform and the bank's electronic platform for engineering, procurement and construction EPC, which was launched during the activities of the third edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair held in Cairo. Al-Mashrat stressed the vital role played by development partners to finance the private sector and provide consulting and technical support services, as soft financing and contributions worth $10.3 billion were made available over the past 4 years.
And now we are joined over the phone by Ambassador Ayoub, Mahmoud Ayoub, Minister Plenipotentiary Commercial. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon to you and to the viewers.
So, Ambassador Ayoub, how would you describe the role of Afreximbank in supporting the African economies?
African Export and Import Bank plays a dominant role in facilitating trade. And when we say facilitating trade, this means that we are increasing exports of the African countries to each other. These are the inter-African trade bilateral relations are very important to the economies of all the members of the continent, the 53 members of the continent, although they are not all members in the African Exim Bank. This is one thing. Other thing is that when we are garnering support for our development projects, we prefer the local suppliers, local facilitators, like the African Exim Bank. Why? Because the cost will be far less. That is very important for the Egyptian economy and for all the African economies, whether emerging economies or developed economies like that of Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. These are far developed than the other countries, but in all cases, Egypt is to support and Egypt is to benefit from the facilitation projects and initiatives offered by the African Export-Import Bank, and it is mutually beneficial for the countries in respect that is more than Egypt, that is other countries in all over Africa.
And how do you see the need for African countries to achieve economic integration?
Economic integration is very important. Why I say very? Very important because we know that in many cases, Egypt and other countries are importing African exports through intermediaries in Switzerland or in Europe or in the States or even in China. So we are cutting the cost to the economies of African countries through this integration. This is one thing. Other thing is that when we are creating or establishing new industries, it is in some industries like the car industry, we cannot, one country cannot produce all the parts of the car independently. So when some parts are produced in Egypt, other parts are produced in South Africa, for example, or Algeria or whatever. This means that this kind of cooperation is beneficial to all the parties to this kind of cooperation, because it cuts the cost and it is interdependence between the African countries themselves. We put the political considerations aside and focus on economic considerations which are beneficial for all the parties concerned in this respect.
So, sir, Afreximbank said that the financings helped strengthen the ability of Egyptian companies to expand their business on the African continent. How would you elaborate on the statement and the importance of investing in the African continent?
The bank plays an important role and the dominant role and the vital role as far as investment in Africa is concerned, investment in African countries is concerned, investing in African industries is concerned. This means that when the bank is financing new industries or increasing the capacity of existing industries, this means that we are making big benefits from economies of scale, that's production at higher scale, and this is beneficial for the bank itself, of course, which is very important, and for the countries in this respect, and it encourages new industries to crop up in African countries, and this is the importance of the role played by this bank as far as the African continent is concerned, and at the same time, it encourages investment. When I say investment, I don't mean only local investment or African investment. It encourages foreign investments in Africa because it establishes the base or the sound base for any new industries to be established in the African countries.
And how would you describe the threat of food security on Africa, and what steps can be taken on the short term to evade the crisis?
Really, it is a big issue and important issue, and it has many ramifications, whether social or political. So food security is the criteria by which we judge the success or failure of government policies. When we come to Egypt and other countries, we find that the food security takes a priority in our plans and in our vision to the present and to the future. And food security is better supported when there is interdependence between the African countries. When we look to a country like Sudan or South Africa or Nigeria, we find that many opportunities are there to increase agricultural production, and this will be reflected on the level, on the standard of living, and also it will create agro-industries in these countries and in other countries. So food security is of utmost importance. It is given first priority as far as interdependence between African countries, and Egypt is playing a dominant role in this respect and giving a good example of putting it at the first, prioritizing it as far as the new projects are concerned, land reclamation is concerned, agro-industries is concerned, that is, and import facilitation is concerned. All these are considerations which are taken kept in mind when we are establishing the framework for food security in the African continent.
Sir, one final question. How do current global developments highlight the need for the activation of the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Africa needs very much economies of scale, interdependence, foreign investments, and also cooperation with other powers in the world, other countries in the world. We need these countries as much as they need us. That is to say, African countries are making many initiatives to facilitate investment in their own lands, and at the same time giving many preferences to foreign investors, and this will encourage investing in African countries and also, will I say, investing in the near future by African countries who are taking these initiatives. This was done by Egypt in several instances, and now it is repeated in African countries who are making use of the Egyptian experience in this respect.
Yes, finally, I'd like to thank you, Ambassador Ayoub Mahmoud Ayoub, Minister Plenipotentiary Commercial. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And back to our reports from the African continent and from Sudan. The main pipeline carrying oil from South Sudan through Sudan for export has been suffering stoppages since last month due to problems linked to the war between Sudan's army and the rapid support forces. South Sudan had been sending about 150,000 barrels per day of crude through Sudan for export under a formula established with the South Sudan gained independence from Khartoum in 2011, taking most oil production with it. The details follow.
16 letters from Sudan's Minister of Petroleum declared force majeure on deliveries of oil through the pipeline to a terminal near Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. The letter said gelling had restricted flows on February 10, and that after this was cleared, a major rupture occurred at another point in the pipeline. The letter said both incidents occurred in areas affected by fighting and that communications had been hampered by network outages that spread across Sudan in recent weeks. The quantity of oil affected and resulting loss of revenue from the stoppage were not immediately clear. South Sudan had been sending about 150,000 barrels per day of crude through Sudan for export under a formula established with Sudan. The exports are an important source of revenue for South Sudan, and Sudan takes a cut of the oil as a transit fee. The official Sudanese sources, who spoke on condition of anonymity and are aligned with the army, blamed the RSF for the stoppage, saying it took place in RSF-controlled territory. An RSF media official denied that the force was responsible and said that it respected the agreement for oil exports between Sudan and South Sudan.
And from Senegal, Senegal's President-elect Bassirou Diomaye vows to govern with humility. Faye is said to be declared the next president after his main rival called him to concede defeat. Details follow.
Senegal opposition presidential candidate Bassirou Diomaye Faye, a political newcomer popular among disaffected youth, promised on Monday to govern with humility and transparency. Faye, said to be declared the next president after his main rival called him to concede defeat, thanked President Macky Sall and other candidates for respecting Senegal's democratic tradition by recognizing his victory well before official results. Provisional results showed Faye with about 53.7% and Amadou Ba from the current ruling coalition with 36.2% based on tallies from 90% of polling stations in the first round vote. Ba and Sall both congratulated Faye, who turned 44 on Monday. They hailed the outcome as a win for Senegal, whose reputation as one of West Africa's most stable democracies took a hit when Sall postponed the vote. Analysts say a peaceful transition of power in Senegal would mark a boost for democracy in West Africa, where there have been 8 military coups since 2020. Some of the juntas that seized power have cut ties with traditional regional power brokers such as France and the US, turning instead to Russia for help in their fight against insurgency, spreading through countries that neighbor Senegal.
And by that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of Africa Today. Thank you for watching.